Let's go through 7 of my all-time favorite fantasy and fantasy romance standalones because let's be honest, sometimes you just don't feel like picking up a 10-book fantasy series where each book is about 800 pages. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Kenzie Deeren and I have a passion for fantasy books and rambling incessantly about them. Today is going to be a really fun episode where I go through 7 of my favorite standalone fantasy books, and there's going to be a little bit of everything. I have academic fantasy and high fantasy. I have fantasy romance. I have gothic fantasy. I have YA fantasy. So truly there will be something for everyone in this video. So let's get right into it, starting off with one of my favorite books of all time, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. In this book, we follow our main character, Addie, and this begins in the early 1700s in France, where she makes a deal with a dark god, aka she's making a deal with the devil for immortality. But the catch is no one will ever remember Addie again. So if she walks out of a room and then walks back into it, no one knows who she is. It's almost impossible for her to have any sort of human connection, for her to make any mark. And she lives this way for hundreds of years. That is until one day in present day New York City, she walks into a bookstore and a boy named Henry looks at her and says, "I remember you." We follow Addie living throughout historical events, trying to leave her mark on the world, even though it's a seemingly impossible task. We see Addie experience loss, tragedy, loneliness, as well as experiencing the very highs of humanity and human emotion and being able to experience things most people can only read about or only hear about because of her immortal existence. Addie's relationships obviously are only with 2 people in this book, one of those being the dark god named Luke, who cursed her with this immortality essentially, and then the second person being Henry, the boy who remembered her in the bookstore. And both of these relationships were so interesting and so unique from each other and unique in general. I thought that the relational aspect of this book was exceptional and very well done, and each relationship posed a very different set of questions that were very interesting for me to contemplate. Luke truly is one of my favorite literary villains. I think he's extremely complex and you really don't ever know what you're going to get with this character. There's almost a part of you that is rooting for him a little bit because he is humanized through the eyes of Addie at different points of this book, and then we are kind of just brought back to the reality that like he's essentially the devil. So it's a very interesting like give and take relationship with the 2 of them that I loved reading about and I would love to read more about, even though I know that this is a standalone. Henry was almost the opposite of Luke in a lot of ways, and I really enjoyed watching his relationship with Addie because it was tragic, sweet, and beautiful all at once, and we were able to not only see their lens through Addie's perspective, we got Henry's perspective as well, and he's a very flawed character, but a very good one, if that makes any sense. Like, I really enjoyed the juxtaposition of him to Luke. This story is truly exceptional. It covers so many interesting topics, such as what is the mark that you leave on the world, and do you want to leave a mark? What is love? What is good or bad? There's a lot of topics surrounding morality and what makes people fundamentally good or bad people. And also, what would you give up to get what you want? And is that worth the price of it? Like, are the consequences that you get worth the thing that you're gaining in this instance? So like one example of that is living forever and being immortal worth the cost of basically never having another human connection in your life? Interesting things to think about. I really enjoyed this book because it made me think about a lot of things. This is the type of book I would sit down at a coffee shop with and just talk for like hours because I think it's so fascinating. I think that this book, it's a love letter to art, it's a love letter to humanity, and I will never stop singing its praises. I also just want to shout out the writing style. V.E. Schwab's writing is beautiful. The prose are stunning and lyrical in this story, and the style of writing matches the overarching themes of the book so much. Now I'm about to be a little bit weird. I love this book so much that I got an "I remember you" tattoo right here. So like, this really has my stamp of approval. Next up, we have another book that truly altered like who I am at my core, and that is Babel by R.F. Kuang. In this book, we follow an orphan from Canton, China, who is brought to London by an Oxford professor, and we follow his upbringing from a young boy into a young man, where he's basically prepped from this trip to be enrolled in Oxford's prestigious School of Language and Arts and Magic, and that is Babel. So once he arrives at the school, he realizes that the life of academia and the life of Oxford is not what he thought it was going to be. Our MMC Robin has very high hopes and high expectations when he enrolls in Oxford and finally gets to the school that he has been prepping for his entire life. He and his very small class of the Babel students immediately become fast friends, and they all share these really high hopes of life, and they begin experiencing the highs and lows of schooling together. Soon after being at the school, Robin is forced to face the very dark and dangerous realities of Babel and its direct participation with British imperialism and the direct destruction of Robin and his friends' homelands. After being at the school also, Robin and his friends come face to face with the continual perpetuation of racism and misogyny that is basically found in the very foundation of this school and of this program. Robin becomes torn with the decision to either stay at Oxford and be complicit in these awful atrocities, and just be comfortable in the complacency of academia, or if he wants to join the Hermes Society, which is a rebel group, and their whole purpose is to basically revolutionize and stop the destruction that they believe Babel is causing. This story exquisitely covers topics such as racism, imperialism, colonialism, misogyny, the complacency of academia, if rebellion always needs to be violent, the importance of linguistics and translation, and so much more. The ending of this book truly ruined me. Like, it actually took a piece of my soul away forever that I will never get back. But I'm honestly more than okay with that, because I think that this is one of the books that everyone should read. The lessons in this story are so important now more than ever. And truly, I say this all the time, I cannot believe that I am walking the same earth as R.F. Kuang. She truly is a literary genius, and I know that this is a modern classic. So because your girl has range, I am now going to be going in a completely different topic, and that is going to be one of my all-time favorite dark gothic, dark academia romances, Nocticadia by Kari Lake. This is a slow burn professor student set in a dark academia setting, and it's a spooky atmosphere. It's a little gory, but I ate every second of this book up. Like, I loved this book. In this book, we follow our FMC Lilia, who gets accepted into a mysterious and infamous school on an island off the coast of Maine. This university specializes in studying a rare parasite that Lilia believes is the reason her mother has passed away. This university actually specializes in a very rare and unknown parasite that Lilia believes killed her mother. And when she gets there, she meets Dr. Death, aka Professor Bramwell, and he is currently a professor at that school, obviously, and his specialty is studying this specific parasite. And he's cranky, he's a morally black professor, and things just really take off from there. Although obviously their relationship is forbidden, the pair just can't seem to stay away from each other. Shocking, I know how that always goes. And the two embark on a very dangerous and toxic journey. As the pair become closer, they also begin working together and learning more about this parasite, and they uncover some very dark and dangerous secrets, and not only about the school, but about both of their past, both of their families, that could literally cause so many issues and uncover so many crazy crimes. The story really just like explodes. There's secret societies, there's like murder mysteries, there's literally every single thing in this book, but the romance, oh my God. Like, I loved the story, but the romance was just like so good. Listen, it was awesome. I'm not even going to lie, like, chef's kiss. And honestly, I'm typically not like a huge spice girl, but the spice in this book is so good. Just take my word for it. If you are looking for a dark, addictive, morally black MMC professor, slow burn romance with so much tension, and he's possessive, like, this is for you. As I said, it's a dark academia setting, it's forbidden, there's secret societies, it's spooky. Like, Kari Lake is a genius. She is a master of creating settings like this, and this book is just like the pinnacle of her greatness. Okay, next up we have another all-time favorite book of mine, and that is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. I accidentally binged this in one day because from the first second I put it up, you would have had to pry this away from me. I was feral for this book, and I think everyone else should be too. This is the most beautiful writing I have ever read in my life. I stand by that opinion 100%. I've never read anything that elicited the same compelling emotion. I literally felt like I was like a vampire in the Vampire Diaries, being like compelled when I was reading this book. For those of, I'm so weird sometimes. I'm not even going to apologize anymore. But anywho, like, this book was just like, the writing in it, insane. I've never read anything like it. Amazing. Anyway, here we follow a set of letters written to Dracula by his first wife, Constanta, after he has passed away. And no, that's literally not a spoiler, because that is how this book starts. Basically, this book begins with Dracula saving Constanta, and she's a, mortal, like, poor village girl in the very beginning of time, Europe, basically. And We follow their story living throughout history and just seeing how their relationship progresses through the centuries. So what starts off as just the two of them slowly changes because after some time, Dracula decides to bring in some more members into their family. So one of those members is a Spanish aristocrat named Magdalena, and then he also brings in a Russian starving artist named Alexei. And once there is a group of them, Constanta is basically able to say, wait, this whole thing is really bad. There's a lot of dangerous power dynamics at play. We're not actually safe. And she starts to finally realize that Dracula, is awful. He's a villain. He's manipulative, he's possessive, he's dangerous. And only when she feels love for the other members of her family does she finally realize that something needs to change. This is a dark and haunting tale of longing, of possession, of jealousy, and just how far someone would go to save those that they love. This story is about love, loss, and learning that it's never too late to leave a bad situation. Where the Dark Stands Still by A.B. Poranek is one of the most beautiful and heart-wrenching stories that I have ever read. This is a YA book, but do not let that fool you, because when I finished this book, it felt like someone took my heart out, put it through a meat grinder, and then ran it over with a bulldozer for good measure. But I am obsessed with this book and will always recommend it. I think it is absolutely fantastic. So here, this is a book actually based off of Polish folklore, which I really enjoyed, the more traditional folklore that was very clearly in the story. But anyway, we follow our FMC Liska, and she is a village girl who is an outcast because she has magic, and magic is outlawed in her town. She becomes desperate to try and get rid of her magic, and she ends up running into the very dangerous woods where she comes face to face with the Lezzie, who is the demon warden of these woods. And basically she ends up in a bargain with him where she has to live in his manor and work for him for a year. And then after that year is up, he will help her get rid of her magic. So we actually find out that the house is sentient, which is phenomenal, and that it's also haunted by some spirits from long ago, and there begins to be this really beautiful found family in this story. We also follow Liska's journey into self-acceptance and self-love, and that includes loving her magic. And we also see the Leslie's transformation from this demon monster, basically, who has the blackest black heart, and slowly he becomes someone who would give up everything he has worked for hundreds of years to save those that he cares about. The pair's journey and character development separately and together is really beautiful and really well done. And as I said, the end of this book is one of the most tragic endings that I have ever read in my life. But truly, I think that that is what made this such a standout book for me, because of how brave the ending was. This will forever be in my brain because the ending was so moving. Okay, Fairydale by Veronica Lancet is a dark, gothic, paranormal, historical fantasy romance with horror aspects. So literally something for everyone. And listen, I do actually know that this book isn't for everyone, but I really loved it, so you should give it a try. This story follows our FMC Darcy, who finds out that her biological father has passed away and left her in a will. Previously, she always just thought she was an orphan, but in order to receive any of her inheritance, she has to travel to the small town of Fairydale to be at the reading of the will. When she gets to Fairydale, Darcy realizes that literally nothing is as it seems, and that everything and everyone in this town is weird. There's something off, there's something spooky, and she does not know what is going on. While dealing with all of the bizarre situations going on in town, Darcy also finds herself in a little bit of a love triangle. We have our first suitor named Caleb, who is from one of the founding families of Fairydale, and he's this dark, mysterious bad boy who seems kind of dangerous, and he's courting her during the day. But then at night, when Darcy is dreaming, she seems to be having these dreams and encounters of almost what she thinks could be her past life with this haunting man named Eamon, who is basically courting her in her sleep. And if all of that is not enough, Darcy also finds out that there's a dark, dangerous evil looming beneath the surface of this town. And of course, she just might be the answer to all of it. I really can't say much more about this without giving it away, because truly almost every page of this book is a plot twist or something new's happening. I feel you really don't know what is going on until the very end of it, but I love books like that because it really keeps you on your toes. It keeps things interesting. But what this story really is at its core, it is a love story. This is a romance. This is one of the most beautiful romances I've ever read. This is the type of romance that people write ballads about. This isn't, I would crawl through heaven and hell for you. I would wait 1,000 years for you if it meant that I had one more second. The yearning, the pining, the obsession, oh my God. And finally, ending on a super high note, we have Blood Over Haven by M.L. Long. This is another straight fantasy book that truly is life-changing. I think This is one of the best books I have ever read, like infinite stars, everyone should read this. This story follows our FMC Siona, who is the first ever female to ever be admitted into the high magistracy in the city that she lives in. And once Siona is admitted into the magistracy, she thinks that the worst of this is behind her, that the misogyny is behind her, because she believes that her colleagues will treat her as equals because she earned her place to be there. But she very quickly learns, literally after like 2 seconds, that that is not the case, and that misogyny runs so deeply in the magistracy that it's almost its foundation. Some especially awful high mages play what they think is a prank on her first day, and instead of giving her a research assistant like every other high mage has, they said that her research assistant can be the janitor. And so she decides, okay, that's fine. He will be my research assistant then. And the janitor's name is Thomal, and the two of them actually form a very unlikely friendship and an unlikely bond as they begin to work together and they begin to study together. Thomal is a Quen refugee from outside of the city's magical border, and because of her relationship with him and because of working with him, Siona is forced to come face to face with the horrendous treatment of refugees in the city and basically her silent complacency with that treatment. And as the pair continue to work together, they unintentionally uncover extremely dark and dangerous secrets about the foundation of the city, about the foundation of the magistracy. And it is so much worse than anything Siona ever could have imagined. So she has to decide if she has to basically face her own privilege and decide if she wants to continue being complacent with this really awful situation, or if doing the right thing is worth the cost that will happen in the end. The ending of this book is exceptional, and the journey that Siona takes specifically is a really beautiful one, because it's very layered. On one hand, you can say like she's oppressed because she's dealing with misogyny, and then on the other hand, to people such as Thomal and the Quen refugees, like she is considered an oppressor. So it's a very like layered take, and it's her, I guess, realization of that and coming to terms with that fact is really interesting, and her character development, I think, is phenomenal. And if you've read this book, you know that the ending of it is exceptional. Like how she ends up handling everything, I think, is awesome. I was hysterically crying, but like amazing. Really, the points hit home in this. This is another story that covers so many topics such as misogyny, privilege, racism, colonialism, the mistreatment of refugees, religious propaganda, what is good, what is evil, morality, and so much more in just over 500 pages. This is a literary feat, and as I said, this is one of the best books I have ever read. If you are still here, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope that you enjoyed these recommendations as much as I do. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any of my updates.